Hi, my name is Ben King. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in the Philadelphia area, and today we're going to be talking about sexual desire poisons. So, what they are, what they look like, what you can do about them, so on and so forth. So, let's get into it. So, we're going to start with the overview. So, like it says, why is this important to talk about? What aren't sexual poisons? What are sexual poisons, real world examples from clients that I've had, things like that. No one specific, but just kind of general anecdotes. And then what's the antidote to each? Okay, so first, why is this important to talk about? So one is sex is everywhere in our society, but we rarely have open conversations about it. I mean, it's something where it's all over the media, TV shows, movies, but it's often in a kind of joking way, or it's in sort of a ideal scenario, like it goes perfectly and everyone is on the same page. So that's one reason that a lot of couples just aren't really equipped to be able to talk about these things. Again, because it's everywhere, but we're not actually talking about it. Second is the longer the poisons are there, the more difficult it is to fix them, let alone even talk about them. So the third one is when your sex life is going well, it can make the relationship better by a bit. But when your sex life is not going well, it can really kind of hinder the whole relationship. It can make the whole thing feel a lot less satisfying, fulfilling, things of that sort. So next is what aren't sexual poisons? So we're going to be thinking about all of the kind of turnoffs that are on Cosmopolitan magazines, things like that. So poor hygiene, rushing foreplay, being too aggressive or too passive, doing just the same thing every time, too vanilla, having the lights on or off. I mean, everything like that isn't really going to be a sexual poison. Now, it can grow into that if the two of you are having arguments about different things like that, and it's becoming a theme in the relationship. So what are sexual poisons? So the three that I've come across the most, the first being anger, second being distance, and the third being anxiety and pressure. And again, like I said, these are just the most common that I've experienced. It doesn't mean that there's no other sexual poisons out there. This is just from my standpoint. Okay, and so for anger, this is usually pretty easy to spot. So this is, you can see it by just the tension, the coldness in the relationship, and especially the negative interactions. When there's anger, there's going to be a lot of negative interactions, not neutral, not where the two of you are just kind of passing each other through the night, but negative interactions. Sex is either not a factor or it's handled in a very harsh way. So the most common dynamic I've experienced is for heterosexual couples, the wife will shut down the husband in a pretty harsh manner, and then the husband, he will respond with contempt. So then just the two of them end up pushing each other further and further away. So both in this dynamic, both partners feel like they're being treated unfairly, and they get more and more angry and resentful. I mean, it's not something where one person feels hurt, the other person completely understands where they're coming from, and they're able to work on things. No, I mean, one person feels hurt, that person reacts negatively, then the other person feels hurt, and so they're both just really caught up in their own hurt, which I think is completely understandable. So the second one, distance. Distance can seem like anger, but while anger is usually more explosive, distance is more apathetic and numb. So usually in these couples, they'll feel like roommates, they'll feel just like business partners, and they'll say that the relationship just doesn't feel as smooth or as natural as before. They might not say that the relationship is terrible and we're always getting into fights, but it's that numbness, it's that apathy, it's the discomfort that really kind of marks it being distance. There's also usually sexual anxiety. So even if the couple thinks about having sex or trying to initiate, usually that'll bring up a lot of anxiety because it feels kind of awkward because there's the distance. There's not that easy connection that the two of them have. And two types of couples that are especially susceptible to this pattern is couples who have recently had a child or children, as well as couples who've been together for a long time. So why that is, I mean, for couples who've been together for a long time, oftentimes since you've been together for so long, you just kind of get complacent. You don't work as hard as maybe you could. But for couples who have recently had children, this can be really tough because, I mean, for a variety of different reasons. But I mean, they're tired, they're in parent mode, they're in mom and dad mode instead of husband and wife, boyfriend and girlfriend mode. And they just interact a lot less as romantic partners, and they just interact more as mom and dad. So there's a bunch of different factors for why that is, but I think those are kind of the main ones. And then lastly, anxiety and pressure. So first, performance anxiety. So this is not being able to quote unquote perform. So either get or maintain an erection. And so what this does is that this can make both people, but even if it's just the male in the relationship, it can make him very anxious because he's looking at sex as a performance. Like if I don't perform, then this is a failure. This means that I'm not a man or something like that. And so it creates this really difficult dynamic of, okay, I wasn't able to get or maintain an erection. Now I'm feeling anxious about it. And that anxiety is an absolute killer to just sexual desire and spontaneity with each other. And then negative body image, that's just feeling insecure and shame about your body and how it looks and or how it functions. Again, this is, I see it the most with women, due in part because messages in our society are everywhere about you have to be this particular way. But that can also be really difficult because if I'm feeling really insecure and feel shame, and I don't feel comfortable to work together with you about it. Maybe I haven't shared it with you. Then I might feel really pressured with sex. That I'm going to see your advances, and this insecurity is going to bubble up, and I'm going to want to push away so that I don't have to hurt like that. And so then this could put you in a bad mood, which makes me feel even worse, maybe resentful, maybe just upset at myself. And it's just this really tricky cycle that we can get into. Again, these are kind of a combination of anxiety and pressure because if I have performance anxiety and I feel pressure from the other person that I have to perform, that's just going to make the anxiety worse. And same thing with negative body image. If I feel pressure from you that I have to have sex right now or that I have to be a certain way, again, it's going to be an absolute killer for my desire to have sex. All right, and so some real world examples. So we'll start with anger. So Joe, 45, and Sam, 45, they've been together for 17 years. Their relationship has been rocky for about 4 years with frequent arguments. Their sex life has gone from one that was satisfying, relatively frequent, to pretty much non-existent. Both feel more and more mistreated by the other and less close. Their desire to spend a romantic moment with each other is also non-existent. And so again, you can see how this is something that is a poison because it's not like one thing that just happened within a week. I mean, it's something that's been there and been built up for years. And so now is distance. So Rob, 34, and Jen, 35, have been together for 10 years, have a 3 and 1 year old. Their sex life has changed as they've had children, but they're rarely intimate in any way. So holding hands, cuddling, just kissing throughout the day, something like that. There isn't a lot of active resentment they have for the other, but very little closeness. They both feel like roommates or business partners and imagine initiating sex to be a clumsy, awkward process. So again, just like the other one, just like all of these poisons, it's something where it's built up over time. It's not something that's really quick. And for this example, it might not even feel like this urgent thing they have to fix right now. It might just feel like, yeah, we have kids and this isn't something that's kind of on our priority list right now. Okay, so for anxiety and pressure, Dan, 28, and Sarah, 27, have been together for a few months. Dan has recently had trouble climaxing during sex and usually deals with this by isolating because he feels ashamed. This is a dynamic I often see with performance anxiety, that the guy will lose his erection and then just immediately stop having sex and leave the room because it's something where he already feels so much shame, so he just wants to get out of that environment. Sarah, who already has a negative body image, takes this personally and assumes his troubles are connected to how she looks. There's so much shame and embarrassment that come up for both that they avoid talking about it and having sex altogether. So again, this dynamic makes it feel like talking about these things is just a minefield. So they just don't talk about it, which again, I think is understandable, even if it kind of keeps them trapped in that cycle. All right, so antidotes to each poison. So first, most important, acknowledge them if they're there and talk to each other about them. This is the most important because being able to acknowledge that, okay, we have a poison, we have a sexual desire poison right now, it kind of takes it off the two of you specifically. So instead of looking at each other as the bad guy, you're acknowledging that there's a poison and you're collaborating against the poison. So it's kind of the two of you as a team against that poison. So for anger specifically, try to talk to each other as teammates instead of as enemies or adversaries. Try to work through some of those issues that you have together. So in doing this, again, this is so much easier said than done. I can make a whole video on this in and of itself, but try to share with each other instead of blaming each other or building a case against the other person. Being able to talk through things in that type of way is your best bet in being able to work through that anger. Then for distance, share your desire for closeness and connection with the other person. Expressing a positive want or need can really grab your partner's attention, and it can feel really collaborative. It grabs their attention because they're hearing it in such a different way. I mean, usually we hear things like that as criticism or I'm not doing this well enough, something like that. But if we express a positive want or need, like, hey, I would really like to spend some time with you, that's a much different way of coming at it that can, again, feel very collaborative. All right, so for performance anxiety, prioritize pleasure over performance. And so what that means is that, again, for a lot of people, and especially for guys, the way that we look at sex is a performance. I have to be a certain way. I have to maintain an erection the whole time. I have to climax and she has to climax. I mean, it's sex becomes just a performance instead of it being just pleasurable, which I think most people would say, like, yeah, that's the purpose of having sex, is for it to be pleasurable. So try to focus less on performing, try to focus much more on, are the two of you just having a good time? Because again, you cannot have an erection, you can still have pleasure. I think that's a really important part because again, if we just focus on pleasure, that in and of itself is going to lessen the load of the anxiety that's there. And so some things that I would definitely look out for is the other person adding to your anxiety. So for example, if you have a partner who is criticizing you for not being able to perform, that's going to be really difficult because then it's not just you putting pressure on yourself, it's the other person putting pressure on yourself as well. So again, prioritizing pleasure is not just for the person experiencing performance anxiety, it's for the other partner as well. And so for negative body image, recognize any dynamics that are making things worse. So for example, is the other person commenting on your body in any type of negative way? Are they commenting on what you eat or what your activity level is like, things like that? Are they commenting on those things in a negative way? That's just reinforcing that negative body image. Is there anything coming from your partner that's making you feel worse about things? Or is it largely just coming internally? I've had couples where it's different for each. There are some couples where the other partner is making critical statements about the other person's body. And I've had couples where the other person is nothing but supportive, but the other person still has a negative body image. So I think it's being able to ask yourself, okay, do we need to work on this together, or do I have to do a lot of individual work as well? And again, us talk about it, but is it largely the individual work that's going to allow me to kind of shed that anxiety, the shame, the insecurity, which again is very much easier said than done, but still important to be able to recognize. And lastly, of course, I mean, if these things are too difficult to talk about with each other, or you feel like you're not really making any headway in talking about it, go to a therapist who specializes in sex therapy. I mean, I think that's something that can really help to be able to give the two of you a safe space to be able to talk through and work on these things, to be able to get to a much better place in the relationship as a whole and your sex life specifically. But so that's all for today. Hopefully it was informative. If you know anyone who might be struggling with something like this, feel free to send it to them. And yeah, I will see you all in the next video.